Do-do-do. Hey, almost missed the landing mark there. If I don't mention this, I'll get all sorts of comments about it. Yes, I have a cut on my face. I know it looks like hell. This too shall pass. This nice encounter with a piece of metal railing that fell on me. Yeah. Wonderful, right? Well, just the nature of life. Um, One of the most fascinating things, and I've thought about this for years and plumbed the depths of the nature of light, and it just keeps going deeper and deeper. Ultimately, you do reach a bottom, but then at the bottom, you realize at the bottom of the well of understanding the nature and mechanics of light, everything else is everything else springs from that same position. And not my position, everything within quantum and relativity, by their own admission, not mine, is based upon their understanding of light. But nothing that they know about light is actually accurate. First, I'd actually like to read a bit of a untranslated work, or is it? An ancient, I can't say lost, but a extremely old work here. And you tell me what you think, and I could actually translate all of it. However, it's one heck of a job to think about doing that. And there's one word in here which I'm just going to call cannot say. It's the name of a group of beings. No, not extraterrestrials. It's fundamental questions about the nature of light. And the title of the work could be translated a few different ways. My favorite translation would be The Lost Parables of Light. So I'd like to read just a little bit of this and actually get into the nature of light and some really important things I've never said about light before. And even Walter Russell, you know, he thought very, very long about light. He didn't understand it, but he did make quite a few discoveries about light, and if anybody were to superficially read it, they'd think, well, this is just crazy about light, but actually all of it is true. So I'm going to read a little bit of this. It's one person speaking to another entity, to another being. And I can't say the name of this group of individuals, so I'm just going to say they cannot says. These entities, or these people I can't speak about, speak of the secret of the universe being found in the nature of light. And the answer is, these beings speak of mere humans who confuse light with that of its nature, the illumination that is seen. But isn't this illumination also to its nature? No, illumination's, light's nature, or I actually put illumination, which is accurate, light's nature, is the nature of light. Illumination is the nature of light, for light itself is the principle and the father of light. But all beings see light. This is the illumination as well. Is it not the same? No, what is seen is not light, as the cannot say, or these beings, have instructed ancient humans. I can actually put the old humans, but I translated ancient humans, to understand such that they might grasp this universe within which we live. Would you assume a child sitting on the beach and struck unknowingly by a large wave is considering the water, or the force of same as having arisen, the wave and its resultant force? Answer the questioner originally. Surely so, the child considers in such a case only the ocean's wave and the impact upon his being. Further on in the work, there are two darknesses. There's the darkness cast by matter, which the evil worship with all its givings, and givings is still, there's a better word to translate than that, so I apologize for that. With its forms and dazzlements and an unseen darkness of the lights unknown to mere mortals. Word mere is not actually in there. Both alive and deceased, both to demons and likewise to the cherubim. This is the dark sun, which is the unseen fire of creation. The darkness worshipped by the wise is the dark of the eye and the cavity and the heart of the soul of all living beings. This is that which bestows energy and life. Evil is the world upside down, but seen as rightly, or as righted. For these beings worship the cold shadow, which both does not bestow energy, but drains it, does not give life, but takes it. The shadow, which is the sister to forms and the brother to phenomena. This is the visible sun, which brings forth shadows upon this earth, which the evil and the unwise and the damned cherish and worship. I don't know what you thought about that section there, but the rest of it actually can be put out, and just like everything else that I put out, translations or my own written works, or otherwise it would be free download, so let me know. I'd like to point out some really important things about light that I've never spoken about, and I have a long laundry list, of course, of things about light. And analogies, too. And by the way, people don't get light and illumination. I've pointed out many times that nobody sees light, they only see illumination. Light would be akin to this battery, and if I was broadcasting, the illumination akin to the transmission. And the transmission, of course, is the harmonic of this antenna and the resultant frequency that is put out. When I say frequency and I say wavelength, I'm really, of course, talking about illumination. When we're talking about the battery itself is not light. It would be the energy that is stored in the battery. But humorously, of course, there's no branch of science has not only has ever defined the term field, they've actually never defined energy. If you look up energy, like on Wikipedia, the ability to do work. Well, that's descriptive, but that's not explicative. So some people tried to argue with me, sure, light's energy's been defined. It's the ability to do work. That doesn't define energy at all. It's completely ludicrous. Anyway, a point source field, as in the case of a magnet, is a circular frequency, and just as the same as a circular frequency around a hydrogen atom, which is just super high energy light. A magnet, for example, is of course a point source object, and the magnetic field around, of course, a magnet is no different than the transverse electrical magnetic field of light, i.e. illumination. A magnet with high enough power will, and I've spoken about this endlessly over the years, vanish from the universe. And this is the reason why a more powerful magnet has a smaller spatial magnetic field around the magnet. Illumination of a high enough power will have a circular frequency. And when it has a circular frequency, it's super high energy light, and this is that thing that we call hydrogen. And all atoms are compounds of hydrogen. Even these debased so-called scientists will agree to that. Vidya is an ancient Pali word, the Sanskrit word, the Svidya, they're both the same thing. You could translate it as light, but it also, too, means wisdom. Undeniably, actually, all Pali and Sanskrit translators will agree with me on that. So Vidya, which is light, not illumination, getting to that, is wisdom. But wisdom is just a silly word which means self-proximity, or the thing in itself, such that light, i.e. Vidya, is a thing in itself, the thing in itself, of itself, by itself, with no beginning in time, no spatio-temporal footprint, wherein which this would be the dark sun of the metaphysician, i.e. the principle of energy, not the release of energy, which of course would be the illumination, or in the case of this, and of course radio EMF, EMR, electromagnetic radiation, is just a different type of light. Humans can't see it, but humans can't see most of the electromagnetic spectrum. So the sun, which is light, or Vidya, and Vidya of course is wisdom, which is self-proximity, or the thing in itself, not that which, of course, that the light is known for. Vidya is light, avidya is illumination, also too translated as ignorance, not terrestrial ignorance of the psychophysical being, but transcendent or primordial agnosis. That would be the second one within the Fibonacci sequence. The first one of the Fibonacci sequence would be Vidya, and the second one would be Avidya, light and illumination, wisdom and ignorance. And then someone would ask themselves, because I know you'll ask me, well, how could the attribute of light be absence of light? Or how would the attribute of wisdom, vidya, its attribute be ignorance? Well, ignorance is really an incorrect word. We could say agnosis or avidya, then of course you need to know Greek or Sanskrit or Pali. It just means extrinsic attribute, no different than light and illumination, illumination being avidya. Is it not the case that avidya, prefixual a, which means other than, inverse to, away from? We can actually say avidya means the light which is directed away, or that part of light, which light doesn't have parts, neither does the self or the absolute have parts, which is directed away from itself. Would we not then say of the good, or the one, the first digit of the Fibonacci sequence, its attribute is also too the good. There's the good in principle and there's the good in action. Emulate the one, emulate the good in doing good, right? Well, doing good is action. It is extrinsic. It is not intrinsic. It is not the thing in itself. But nothing in the universe exists, either real or unreal, that doesn't have at least one attribute. This includes, of course, the absolute, which does, of course, have one attribute. So, vidya would be the dielectric, or inertia. Avidya would be no different than saying magnetism. Here we have linked light and illumination, principle and attribute, with wisdom and ignorance, vidya and avidya, the dielectric or inertia, the real definition, original denotation of the term inertia, with that of magnetism. So dielectric, magnetic, light, illumination, wisdom or light, principle. Light's the principle, not the attribute of light. Principle with avidya. Vidya, avidya, light, illumination, dielectric, magnetic, wisdom, and ignorance. Not terrestrial ignorance of a psychophysical being like, man, Bob is one ignorant dude. That would actually be conventional, terrestrial, empirical stupidity, but we use that word in English anyway. Man, he's ignorant. You know, he never went to school. He doesn't know how to read or write. That's something different. In metaphysics, avidya or agnosis is something that is pre-embodiment, not to be confused. This is a problem when you actually communicate with people. You say ignorance, you immediately think of Bob Larry being ignorant. We're talking about primordial agnosis. This is also, too, called ananke, or the Euristos Dias. There's a neat book. I've got it in my back room back there. It's a 369-page book that attempts to translate one word of the ananke. Ananke is the ancient Greek word, also, too, tolma, to reference the extrinsic attribute of the agathon, of the absolute. What's the best way to translate this? It's actually often translated as necessity. We can actually refer to it as the second digit of the Fibonacci sequence, yeah? Which is ananke, i.e. tolma, i.e. avidya, i.e. illumination, i.e. magnetism. The real translation of it, and it's many words, unfortunately, in English, is it can't exist any other way. With the release of this, or the attribute or extrinsic side, if you will, of this, we have this, and it is necessity. In other words, it can't exist any other way. Ananke. And necessity is kind of a ridiculous, obtuse word, which in metaphysics is referencing the principle that it can't exist any other way, i.e. the Euristos Dias, as translated as the indefinite dyad. The only reason it's called Euristos means ahorismos. It means has no line, it has no place or mark. Ahorismos, or in Greek, Euristos. It's not a second one. It is the unmarked, unprincipled, because it's extrinsic side of the principle, of the first one. This is why it's called not the dyad, it's called the Euristos dyad. Euristos Dias. Also, too, the circuit of becoming, getting on actually to light here. Let's just think about this in a second. No different than the circuit of light and illumination. Light is a coaxial circuit, right? It has a rebounding electrical magnetic. It has a longitudinal rarefaction, yeah, and compression. along the line of propagation, but light's not propagating. Light doesn't travel, it doesn't move. It's the hysteresis of the ether. It's the rate of induction of the ether against itself. The circuit of becoming, so no different than light and illumination. When the transverse manifests, in the case of light, the circuit of light, which includes illumination. The transverse electrical magnetic would be illumination, because that's the only thing, i.e. the frequency, the wavelength, whereby which we're able to even know that light even exists at all. That rarefaction and compression is, of course, the light itself. So when the transverse manifests, i.e. the EM, the light vanishes, i.e. the energy. When the transverse vanishes, the light or energy manifests. This is where we get the idea of a photon. When it actually compresses and the electrical magnetic vanish, oh look, there's a photon. No, it's just an energy bundle. And in a high enough frequency vanishes and you have something else, which I'm calling a circular frequency, which is just hydrogen. Reconciliation of light and matter have been done because Mother Nature is really that simple. So when the transverse manifests, the light vanishes, i.e. the energy. So when the transverse, when the transverse manifests, the light vanishes, and when the transverse vanishes, the light energy manifests. So when there's light, i.e. compression along the longitudinal of the light circuit, there is no illumination. Illumination equals frequency. Illumination equals avidya. Illumination equals magnetism. It was only a recent discovery, too, by so-called scientists that most of the transverse electrical magnetic is actually not like half electrical, half magnetic. It's mostly magnetism. I could have told them that years and years and years ago. So when there is light, there is no illumination. And when there is illumination, there is no light. This conjugate relationship, once again, between the magnetic and the dielectric. The principle and the attribute. Vidya, avidya. Dielectric, magnetic. Everything reduces down to the absolute totality of the understanding of light. Isn't that neat? Kind of like almost coincidental, except it's not, because nature is really simple. So ether is the mother of light, matter is the father of illumination. A black hole, for example, is the mother of matter. Illumination is the father of vision. Without illumination, there is no vision, there's no manifestation. We could call it a few different things. Matter is just a circular frequency of super high energy light. Illumination is a toroidal energy circuit. The ether itself is primordial light. Notice I said light, not illumination. If the ether is primordial light, and of course it absolutely is, then all fields are illumination. Magnetism, however, is not illumination. It is, however, under certain circumstances. Tongue twisted there. I needed to have a glass of water before I did this video. Given these facts, we could abduct that light does not exist in the metaphysical sense of existence. What we call the speed of light is the maximum rate of propagation of the medium itself as a transverse coaxial circuit, i.e. inertia perturbation. Not confusing light with illumination. Light neither travels nor can anything emit light by definition. Light is not an emission. Nikola Tesla said that light was a sound wave in the ether. Well, sound's not an emission. When I speak and this microphone is vibrated, which creates an electrical signal which travels into my recording camera, I'm not emitting anything, I'm creating a disturbance in the medium. The medium, of course, is air, which is analogous, of course, to the ether. Yeah? Kind of makes things a little simple, doesn't it? Light exists nowhere unless resistance is met. The complete darkness of space surrounding the sun, for example, is devoid of light. Its manifestation by proxy only occurs when mass, i.e. perturbation, disruption occurs. This setup of loss of inertia, which defines ignorant human beings conventionally, is that which is called light. Light is not an emission. It's not a wave. It's not a wave. No such thing as a wave anyway. A wave is not what something is, rather what something does. If we want to say waves, then we could speak in terms of illumination. But by this principle, illumination doesn't exist either. And it doesn't because it's epiphenomena. When we say waves which don't exist, in other words, something is waving, i.e. an energy circuit, are we not talking about the same thing in terms of frequency and wavelength regarding EMF and illumination itself? Illumination being, of course, the sister or proxy to light, i.e. the extrinsic side of light, i.e. the aoristos dias, i.e. magnetism, i.e. avidya. Pretty sure those frequency and wavelengths are waves or the epiphenomena. What is waving should be the question. And why is it waving? Is not wave a force of what, by what, upon what? Therefore, the extrinsic, attributes of light, that which we call illumination. Light is not a wave, light is not a particle, light is not an emission, light does not travel. Sound doesn't travel either, but we have a speed of sound. That's just the rate of induction of the medium as against itself. What's the maximum rate of propagation of sound against itself, i.e. the vibration of oxygen and nitrogen, which changes with temperature and i.e. air density. Same is true of light. It changes its propagation rate depending on the medium at which the disturbance is occurring. Glass, water, for example, versus a vacuum. Doesn't travel, doesn't have a speed. Speed is just that rate of induction. It's not an emission, yet all of us were brought up to believe that when you flip a light switch, a light is emitting light. Well, it's not emitting anything, and it's not emitting light either. Light is the principle, i.e. the energy. Battery is not emitting anything when I hit the transmit button. This is not merely a receiver, it's also a transceiver. And I hit the transmit button, I drain some of the energy from this battery, and it manifests as a coaxial circuit, which of course is invisible, of a certain frequency and wavelength. But even that's not an emission. That's creating a disturbance in everything here that you can't see. Like what? Sound's not emitting anything. Nobody's emitting sound. Nothing is emitting sound. Creating a disturbance in the medium. Conventional light and EMF is no different. Nothing emits light. Conventionally, if you tell a so-called educated person these facts, they're going to think you're crazy. But if you actually investigate them, it's like everything there is logical, and it actually explains everything now. Light's not a particle, not a wave, not a wave-particle duality, since there are no dualities in nature. It's not an emission, doesn't have a speed. Everything is reducible to the total comprehension of light and its extrinsic attribute, that being illumination. Let me know if you'd like me to go further on this and translate that text in its fruition. If you ever want to contact me, my email's in the description below. Any donations are always warmly welcome. Or you could send me an email telling me what you think, and I do read every comment and every email. I don't reply to every comment, but I read them all. Thank you so much for watching. Lux e Veritas. I wish I didn't have this cut on my face. I know it looks like hell, but what am I going to do about it? Yeah, I can't speed it up. Thank you.